Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a meticulous, really intense deconstruction of an independent investigative review file. This is the work of lead examiner E.F. Vidocq, and we're looking at case NW 2026-016. This is the incredibly tragic and honestly wildly complex death investigation of 18-year-old Nolan Wells. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, and I gotta tell you, the data we're gonna look at paints a completely different picture from the story you might have heard.
Now, to really understand this investigation, we have to start with the initial official narrative. Local law enforcement, led by Sheriff John Ledbetter, officially ruled Nolan's death an accidental drowning with absolutely no foul play. But here's the crucial point, right? According to the independent review file, this conclusion was a premature official ruling. It was made way before any thorough forensic analysis was ever actually completed.
So, as you can probably guess, this case is far from closed. It's actually under active review. And as we dig into the independent analysis of both the digital telemetry and the physical data today, we're going to see some severe structural flaws in that original narrative. The evidence we're about to uncover alongside these investigators, it simply does not align with some open and shut case of an accidental drowning. Not even close. Section 1. The accidental drowning narrative, setting the scene. So the tragic baseline of this case involves an 18-year-old boy recovered from the waters near Horn Island in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a heartbreaking loss for sure, but in investigations like this, human testimony often fails, right? People bend the truth or they just misremember. Data, on the other hand, speaks the absolute truth. The independent review zeroes in on 3 core persons of interest, or POIs, who were companions on the vessel known as the Triton. That's Jack Spitaalo, Morgan Seymour, and Warren Hudson. Now, what's highly notable in the file is their heavily coordinated defensive posture following the incident. They actually went on the Officer Tatum show for a media broadcast where Spitaalo publicly disparaged the victim's grieving mother, and Hudson claims some unnamed secondary witness saw Nolan alive at 6 p.m. It's a very specific, rehearsed public narrative. Section 2. Telemetry and Digital Evidence, the Immutable Record. Okay, let's dive into this. Modern investigations really take shape when they use digital footprints to cross-examine suspect testimonies. Because look, people can coordinate a story all day long, but they can't change the digital echoes they leave behind. Case in point. At exactly 4 p.m., a distress dispatch call was placed to Sea-Taw. But then, we look at the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, or MDMR, their GPS tracking for the Triton. The boat didn't actually depart Horn Island until precisely 4:31 p.m. That is a glaring, totally unexplained 31-minute gap mapped by the GPS data between the call for help and the actual departure of the vessel. Now, during that 4 p.m. distress call, the Sea-Taw dispatcher specifically asked about passenger safety, and the audio recording caught the caller explicitly confirming, yeah, everybody is on board. I really want you to let the gravity of that sink in for a second. The POIs claimed full accountability of their entire party a full 30 minutes before their GPS-recorded departure. They told Maritime Rescue that Nolan was safely on the boat. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive contradiction right at the heart of their public defense. The POIs claimed they had to make a panicked emergency evacuation because their vessel was literally sinking. But the GPS reality? The speed and routing data show a methodical, totally non-erratic, controlled transit directly back to their home dock. The whole sinking boat story is completely dismantled by the precise telemetry data. Section 3. Autopsy and Physical Clues, Beyond the Elements. Now, this is where the findings shift from tragic negligence to potential foul play. The file includes an independent medical examination by Dr. Roger Mitchell. His autopsy identified a red discoloration in the soft tissue at the back of Nolan's head. Furthermore, Nolan was recovered fully clothed. The investigator points out a huge logical disconnect here. A fully clothed person doesn't willingly decide to go swimming in dangerous choppy Gulf currents, and that localized soft tissue trauma, it strongly suggests a pre-immersion concussive event, basically a blow to the head before he went into the water. Because of this, Dr. Mitchell explicitly notes that non-accidental factors simply cannot be ruled out. Then we have the abandoned property. Nolan's cellular telephone was found left right on the dashboard of the Triton. The companions claimed it was left there to keep it dry. I mean, let me ask you a direct, common-sense question. Would you ever leave your phone on a boat to keep it dry if you were actively choosing to remain stranded on an isolated island without your friends? No way. It directly contradicts basic human behavioral patterns. In investigative terms, this is defined as consciousness of guilt. It's essentially the behavioral footprint a person leaves when they know they've done something wrong.
shifting timelines, leaving a companion's crucial communication device behind, and prioritizing media appearances to shape public opinion rather than cooperating transparently with a grieving family. Their constructed alibis and actions are revealing far more than they're hiding.
Now, what's really interesting about this next slide is how we break this all down. Section 4, Confronting the Contradictions, Claim versus Reality. The independent investigator systematically cross-examines the POI's public statements against the hard evidence. First, the claim of the emergency departure due to a sinking boat. Well, the evidentiary rebuttal is the GPS data showing a standard, controlled return trip. The deduction? The sinking boat is a fabricated exculpatory device just to justify fleeing the scene. Second, the claim that Nolan refused to board. The rebuttal is that 4 p.m. audio confirming everyone was on board. The deduction? Nolan was either on the boat at 4 p.m. or they deliberately lied to Maritime Rescue. Finally, the claim that Nolan was left uninjured. The rebuttal is the completely unexplained soft tissue head trauma. The deduction? It points directly to an unreported physical altercation or injury right before he entered the water. Section 5. 2 Vectors of Culpability. Where the evidence leads. Because the initial accidental drowning ruling is just completely unsupported by the physical evidence, lead examiner Vidocq narrowed the investigation down to 2 potential realities. Let's contrast these 2 grim vectors. Vector 1 is criminal negligence and abandonment. In this scenario, an accident or injury occurred. They panicked, fled to avoid liability, and constructed a false narrative to cover their failure to render aid. Vector 2, however, is a direct physical altercation. A dispute resulted in blunt force trauma, incapacitating Nolan, and the harsh maritime environment was used to basically obscure the assault. What you should really take away from this is that both of these vectors involve the conscious construction of a false narrative to cover up the events leading to an 18-year-old's death. So, to unearth the final truth, modern investigators lay out some clear strategic recommendations. Step 1. Subpoena all telecommunications from that 48-hour window to identify alibi coordination. Step 2. Conduct simultaneous isolation interrogations, using that immutable GPS and audio data to actively break their rehearsed timelines. And Step 3. Petition for grand jury transparency to unseal the local coroner's findings and compare them against the independent report to find any deliberate omissions. As the lead examiner noted, the truth requires pressure to fracture the lies. The digital footprint is there. The medical inconsistencies are fully documented. The contradictions are officially on the record. So the only question that remains for forensic justice and for Nolan Wells' family is this: will the grand jury apply the necessary pressure?